This is a follow-up. Welcome, first, by the way. Oh, and before I get into it, bunch of new subscribers in this last week. Thank you. I don't know where that's coming from. I love it. I appreciate it. We're getting near 100 subscribers, so that's absolutely amazing. Please keep sharing, liking. Last week's video on Soto Uke Ushiro Geri, I got a great question from a guy, and as far as I could tell, it's hard for me on YouTube. I'd love to be able to just get a list of who all the subscribers are. I don't know how to do that. I get a notification when a new person comes in, but then to create an actual list of who they all are so I could address them individually would be great. But thank you. I just spaced on who it was that asked this question, but I did respond to you. The question on Ushiro Geri was, does our style, particularly Seidokan, and I'm not the representative of Seidokan, so I don't want to speak for everybody. So if there are others out there, Chris, Donnie, Joe, Marissa, Juan, any others out there who are more detailed on it than this, please feel free to chime in. But the question was, in our style, is the foot perfectly vertical on the back kick? Or does it turn to the side? And if I turn my foot a little sideways, does that automatically make it a side kick? This gets into the question of terminology. And first I'll kind of recap my response to the question. And again, I think he's a Shitoryu guy, best I could tell. That's the only other video I saw that he had posted. The foot position, if you're naming by the foot position, all of the kicks are going to take on a different nomenclature. Okay? For example, Ashiyubi geri, where I kick with the toe. If I'm hitting with the top of the foot rising, that's asoko geri. Typically, we call this my geri because I'm kicking to the front. But what if I maintain that front foot, ball of the foot position, but now I kick the guy to the side? When we do seisan, for example, I've crossed over and stomped. I don't fully turn to the front to do the kick. I'm sort of at an angle, if not even a little bit sideways, and yet I'm performing what would be called a front kick. So we can name a kick by the direction relative to our body which we're kicking. So for example, I have yoko geri because I'm kicking to the side. But is this yoko geri or mai geri? So we can name it then by foot position. Asoko, which is the top of the foot. And I don't know all of the different names for them, but we have mawashi geri asoko, and we have mawashi geri ball of the foot, which I call a short roundhouse kick in English. When we do yoko geri keage, typically the side snap kick, why am I doing them all to the right? Let me do some to the left. We do the side snap kick. It could also be called sokuto geri, okay? Soku being foot, to meaning a blade. So blade foot, which then describes the position of my foot rather than the direction in which I'm kicking. All of that said now, why do we call it ushiro geri? Well, it's ushiro geri because ushiro means behind. The literal definition of the term ushiro, behind. But what happens if I'm facing front? Well, then I turn my back, and the word for turning, mawashi, is to rotate, where we have mawashi geri, right? Mawaru and mawasu, both verbs indicating a rotation. So I'm rotating my hips to do a mawashi, but then there are people who do mawashi by starting in a forward and rotating at the end versus starting with the rotation right from the beginning. Both are mawashi or mawaru, mawashu based kicks. So what's the terminology? Am I naming the part of the foot, the method of kicking, or the direction of kicking? And that's going to determine nomenclature. So, again, with the back kick, if I'm facing forward, and we're doing that combination from video 116, right? Blocking, and then I turn, I am intentionally placing you behind me. Now, if I continue to turn my shoulders, I'm kicking to my side, then yes, it's yoko geri. But if my back's still to you, but my foot turns a little bit, as opposed to staying completely straight down, is it still ushiro geri? Well, of course it is, because ushiro means behind me. I've placed you behind me, now I'm kicking you. Which is why I give the caveat to not let your shoulders turn too far, because then, yes, it is what would be called kaiten yokogeri, kaiten meaning to rotate, or to spin around, okay? Sometimes when we spin, they refer to it as henka, which literally just means to change, okay? So it could be henka kaiten, I could be changing and rotating and spinning. Henka is also, in the word change, is used specifically for a change that is a surprise in a lot of cases. So, for example, in sumo, where you're supposed to meet straight head on, and a guy jumps off to the side, they call that henka. Oh, he changed, he surprised him, it was a shock. In bunkai terms, we have omote, which is straightforward. We have ura, which means the flip side. Ura waza, so we have omote waza, straight in, it is what it looks like. Ura waza, the flip side of the coin, the back or the reverse, okay? And then we have henka as another level, which is a surprise or hidden or a change of the technique. Just as an example of that, this is omote, a punch is a punch. Okay? Ura is, as I pull back, the punch becomes a pulling motion. Henka would be, I move to the side and I strike inward with the forearm. But it's all the same movement. I've just given 3 different ways of applying that movement. And then we can go on to stemi, which is fallen down, body sacrifice version of the movement, and so forth. Anyway, so there are levels of interpretation, but in terms of language, when I say ushiro geri, I'm not referring to the position, verticality of my foot as much as I am to the direction in which I'm kicking. Now, if I keep my knee like I'm a grasshopper, brushing straight against my knee, my foot will tend to be more directly vertical and downward. But if I, again, keep my back and I let my knee drift out, am I still kicking behind me? Or am I kicking beside me? And so the terminology can kind of get funky there. So for other Seidokan for our other Seidokan practitioners, when you do the back kick, are you attempting to brush your knees and stay perfectly vertical as much as possible? And in my response, I said relatively vertical versus perfectly, or does it really matter? Now, another element of that position of my foot kicking is where am I kicking? If I'm going to kick lower, somebody kicking in the groin, or if I had my bag hanging, which I don't right now, and I'm kicking at the bottom of the bag, hitting with my heel is perfectly reasonable. But if I'm going to kick a little higher on the bag, that's going to make it so my toes hit first instead of my heels. So as I kick a little higher, it does tend to become more of a little sideways. So if I'm kicking a person in the groin, having my foot perfectly vertical makes loads of sense. But if I'm kicking them in the abdomen to bend them over, and I bend them here, I don't want to break my ankle by over flexing my ankle, so I might allow my foot to turn a little more angular or even fully sideways in order to contour to the target. The term contouring, it's a lot more common in, for example, Ed Parker's Kempo and in Kempo systems, but it basically refers to the idea of fitting the weapon that you're using into the target that you're hitting. If a guy's head is up, a punch to the throat is great. But if his head is down, that doesn't work as well, and you're just as likely to bend and break your fist and wrist. So if I'm punching to the throat and he tucks, I might make it a spear or even rise to come up in at that angle. That's contouring. Take the knife hand, for instance, okay? The knife hand fits really nicely when we're striking outward at the angle at which we typically hold our hand, fits very nicely into the carotid plexus, carotid artery and nerve here, right on the backside of the sternocleidomastoid muscle of the neck. It also fits beautifully right in here. So if I'm striking up and hitting here, that's a beautiful fit for the knife edge hand. And so on with all of the striking weapons that we have. Okay, doing a palm heel strike into the belly doesn't make a lot of sense. Even turning it here, I don't get it as well. But if I come over to the ribs, now it's a little easier to hit. If I'm hitting in sideways, so basically just fit the weapon to the target, which is why we have different ways of doing a front kick. In a lot of systems, we also have what's called a cross kick, where I turn my front kick foot outward. It's still maigeri, but turned outward. We have maigeri with the ball of the foot. We have ashiyubi, toe kick to the front, which a lot of Ushiro stylists do. We have sokuto maigeri, where I can kick forward with the blade edge of the foot. Okay, we have a front thrust kick, maigeri kekomi, maigeri kekomi, front thrust, more of a push with the heel. We have asoko, rising, which would be obviously fit to the target, our contouring concept. So that's sort of why the specificity and trying to get form too perfect or exact really is not what the name of the kick, ushiro geri, is about. So if I spin and my foot turns sideways there more, some of that is just the follow through of my spin. But as long as my kick is to the back of my body, whether it's straight up and down or semi-sideways, as I continue to rotate my body in the follow through, that's less of an issue relative to the name of the kick. I know that's long, but hopefully that sort of explains it. None of that precludes the fact that perhaps my karate just sucks and I need to keep practicing. What form do you use in your kicks? What do you specify, and do you allow for those variations depending on situation and target of the opponent? Love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Once again, thank you for all the new subscribers. Hopefully that clarifies that answer. And as always, as will I, thank you for joining, but mostly keep practicing.